This is a great hearing, but I have to tell you, I'm sitting here and it's kind of scary. I want to just ask the question about infrastructure development to Mr. Oates in particular, because one of the equations that I see that's sort of missing in terms of the stimulus of infrastructure is sort of the companion infrastructure, which has to do with energy that goes along with it. Because if indeed we're going to talk about rebuilding roads, we have to talk about what it costs across the board. And in terms of energy right now, we're really struggling. You know, how are we going to pay for the oil that goes into the bulldozer or the other equipment? How are we going to move products or materials from one place to another? And one of the challenges that I think we face is how we are identifying an emerging industry, which is the redevelopment of energy and the infrastructure that we need to distribute it. So has your organization taken a position with respect to energy and how it's distributed and what we need to put in the pipeline now? Because a lot of what we're talking about here are dealing with variables that currently exist. And what has made America great is the imagination of what can exist. And I think we have to move into that mode if we're going to talk about prosperity again, and not this, you know, do we print money or do we borrow money scenario. How do we create wealth again, I think, is the major issue that we need to be focusing on. We're trying to survive. Our kids will be struggling to survive if we don't talk about the innovation that has made America great. So I want to know whether there have been any conversations. For instance, you know, we're having blackouts in Brooklyn, New York. And Con Ed can patch and patch, or Keyspan can patch and patch and patch for as long as they want to. It's an old city. This place, as long as we continue to use the type of appliances and lifestyle that we have, we're going to constantly be going through these blackouts. No one's talking about that new infrastructure that goes along with engineering and transportation in order to get us where we need to be. Have you had any conversations or any, has that risen as an issue for your organization?
Energy questions have come up in our organization. We are mostly a public infrastructure organization and deal with investments there. I'm a transportation engineer, so I don't know a whole lot about a lot of the other infrastructure issues. And one of the issues could be that it's more difficult for Congress to get spending in those areas because a lot of that is controlled by public or private companies that deal with the infrastructure for energy. So I can't answer a whole lot.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking construction costs right now skyrocketing.
Right.
Right. A lot of that has to do with labor, but it also has to do with energy. Right. So, you know, maybe Dr. Zandi, you have any ideas about the fact that our energy costs are sort of the companion. It's like the shadow. It's like that extra piece that's hanging off, right? And everything that we're talking about here, whether it's the cost of food, whether it's the cost of products, it's just sort of hanging off, and we're kind of ignoring it, but we're talking about it, but we're kind of playing footsie with it, but it's costing us. Do you have any ideas about how the public can partner to jettison us to deal with this? Because I think that is probably one of the pieces that you know, helps us in the long run. It's the new industry that creates wealth.
We're talking about energy specifically?
Yes, energy specifically.
Yeah. Well, I think here the solution to our energy problems are long-term.
They are.
They're long-term. There's very little you can do in the very short run. I mentioned the gas tax holiday. I think that takes some of the edge off for some folks, but that's just very modest, and it doesn't solve our long-term problems.
Right.
But with respect to long-term energy, there's really what policy should be focused on is supply. And that is, I do support expanding offshore drilling. I think that makes perfect sense. And by the way, you don't need to see oil wells dug and oil coming out to affect the current price, right? Because as soon as the markets sense that this is going to happen, prices will come down to reflect that.
Mr. Zandi, I don't want to take it into one particular industry. What I'm talking about is innovation, right? And there are going to be a whole host of different types of production of energy for us. And if we don't do that, then we're doing a disservice to his 7-year-old son and 3-year-old daughter, because we're talking about the long term. And everything that we're talking about today has that as part of the equation. And while people keep saying it's long term, it's now and it's long term. And if we don't start, because we're doing little pieces, the snippets that you're talking about, right? It still remains a part of the equation that we have yet to address. So, you know, I think that part of the equation, and I'm winding down, Madam Chair, is that we have to make incremental steps as we try to solve the immediate, to come to that point where we've reached the tipping point for the development of new industry and energy. If we don't, we will wake up 10 years from now and the same challenge that we're facing in terms of how we make things happen will continue to exist. So in terms of the economics of that equation, I think we had to have a wider view of each step that we're taking for our economy and what the shadow that's cast by the energy costs involved has done in every sector of our lives. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Ms.